everybody, and welcome to our next super webinar sponsored by Metro EHS Pediatric Therapy. We're really excited to share with you some really great information today about screen time and how to keep your kids super with all of that screen time. We know that kids are inundated today by screens, and sometimes those screens can be great resources. And so I'm super excited to have Jessica Hunt share with us today about how to handle all the screens with our kiddos and what are some great strategic steps to take when it's just too much for kids or when they need those, and how to read those signals. So Jess, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you. So my name is Jessica Hunt, and I am an occupational therapist and regional director here at Metro EHS. I have been an OT for 23 years and specialize in the areas of sensory integration and feeding and swallowing. And today we're going to talk a little bit about screen time, how to help kids transition. But first, I think it's kind of important to dive into some basics and understanding why kids really enjoy screen time. And I think there's, unfortunately, out in the world, there is a lot of conflicting information. So we get a lot of things about negativity about screen time, but there's also a lot of things out there about the positive benefits of screen time for a lot of our kiddos. And so we're going to talk a little bit about both sides of that coin and talk about some strategies that we can utilize. So screen time access and usage, one thing that we really want to encourage, it really needs to be child specific. And we're going to talk about the reasons why in a minute. But it's also dependent on the child and the family. I think blanket statements about this certain amount of time and these rules apply are very generic and really need to be looked at individually of what works for your family and your child, because what might work for you may not be what works for somebody else. Screen time for many of our kiddos that are neurodivergent can have a lot of regulation benefits as well as often communication benefits, and they use it for their way of communication. And so access to those communication and technology is a very important piece of the puzzle for them. And so we want to encourage you to work on finding a balance that works for your child and your family. And so we're going to hopefully share some strategies with you that will help in that journey. So as I said, I want to start with kind of why kiddos love screen time. And I think as many adults, we tend to gravitate to screen time as well to kind of disengage and relax. But for a lot of our kids, you know, we live in a fast-paced world, and many kids have grown up with technology and those things right at their fingertips. And it offers a certain type of sensory input that is very engaging to our brains. It's often fast-paced sounds and lights and fast-paced action and things that really allow many children to get engaged and kind of sucked into that. And that's really because of the release of dopamine. So when we get excited or we find something that we really like with that high intensity sensory input, we get a dopamine release. And dopamine is a chemical in our brain that gets released that makes us want to do things over and over and over again. And so when we get that reward after from our brain that says, oh, that felt good, many people are going to keep chasing that same type of input. And so when we get that really intense input from that screen time, and then our brain says, oh, I really like that, and it's helping my body, they want to keep seeking it out again. So that's part of the puzzle. But also for many children, it gives them a sense of control and autonomy over kind of their environment. So they can control the volume, they can control what they're watching, they can be looking at something that's engaging on their favorite character. And so many kids use that screen time to control their environment and kind of disengage from the sensory environment, which kind of leads directly into the next one, which is kind of escaping reality. And I think we can all relate to that. You've had kind of a crazy day and you sit down, and many of us tend to scroll through our phones to kind of get some of that input and kind of disengage from our sensory environment and maybe everything else that was stressing you out that day. It's kind of all encompassing and really pulls our attention in. For many people, social media and screen time and games and other things can offer a unique opportunity for social connection that takes out that face-to-face ability to have to be face to face with somebody. And so for some of our kids that have difficulty with sensory issues or being in loud environments, it gives them a chance to connect with other people that have similar interests, and often in a controlled way, so they can really control how they're communicating. But it does offer some wonderful benefits for social interaction in a way that's comfortable for people that face to face in person may not be. Educational opportunities, we know that technology and screens offer an amazing ability to give education, and we know, and we'll talk about some educational based apps towards the end a little bit, but those opportunities for even kids that have special interests or kind of a narrow window of interest, they can go on to a screen, they can go to YouTube, they can go to the internet, and they can get a lot of amazing resources about what that special interest is. And often, again, pulling back to social connection, they may find other people that have that intense interest as well. So it offers a unique opportunity for kids to get that educational resources in those specialty areas, along with opportunities for social connection in a way that's very comfortable for them. And for many of our kids, we also talk about the use of screen time and technology in terms of their ability to communicate. So augmentative communication devices, or AAC as they're commonly referred to, are a way to help support a child who is non-speaking or may have difficulty with comprehension or language production that can help them to communicate with the people around them. So oftentimes most augmentative communication devices are screen-based. And so these are things that need to be available to that child at all times. And so these are instances where that screen time is very necessary. And so we want that communication device to be available. They need access, again, at all times. And so again, one of the things that we do typically, best practice for augmentative communication, is to have a dedicated communication device. So oftentimes if a family is using that communication application that they might be using on the same iPad where the child does have an opportunity to go on to YouTube or onto a game that they prefer, unfortunately that makes it really challenging because they might prefer that versus the communication. So we do think that it's important to have that dedicated communication device and have those two things be separate so that they are allowed access to that communication at all times. So augmentative communication, one of the things that we commonly hear is that if they're using an augmentative communication device, that it means they're not going to be able to verbally speak. And the research, unfortunately, just does not support that. It tells us that augmentative communication does not stop or hinder the process of natural language development, and that augmentative communications needs change over time, which often we need a shift in how that's being presented. And we really see that the use of augmentative communication and visuals paired with the opportunity for verbalization increase those opportunities for expressive language. I also think it's really important to point out that for many kids, having access to augmentative communication is really important in terms of when they might be having a difficult time, whether if they're maybe having in the middle of a meltdown or they're having difficulty with their self-regulation and are unable to verbalize. At other times, maybe they are able to be verbal. But there are a large group of population that has what's called dyspraxia, and oftentimes when our system's challenged, meaning that we might be having a difficult time with sensory input in the environment or maybe a transition, and that child might be their brain's kind of shutting down a little bit and a little bit overwhelmed, may not have the same ability to formulate that verbal expression. And we still want the ability to have communication present and available. And so augmentative communication is a wonderful way to do that. It may not be something, again, the needs for most kids will change over time. So we do want to just kind of point that out, that it is something that is used for communication and does not hinder natural speaking and language development, and can be used in conjunction and is a wonderful way to make sure that children continue to use that communication. Again, we don't like to use augmentative communication as a standalone intervention, and often we want that paired with a multimodal language approach. So one of the things I kind of want to shift from augmentative communication to kind of talking a little bit about self-regulation. And in my training as an occupational therapist, the way that I look at self-regulation might be a little bit different, but let me explain kind of how I approach it and how that relates to screen time. So self-regulation is really our ability to regulate our not just our kind of our emotions, but also our internal physical, emotion, and cognitive states that are appropriate to our given environment. So that means that if we're outside and we're at recess and we're having a really fun time and we're running around and we're playing, we're on the swings and we're doing great, and then it's time to maybe transition either into the house for dinner time or to go back sit in the classroom and complete an activity. And if the child is still acting both maybe cognitively, voice level, or body's not able to calm down to transition to those activities, their regulation for that given environment, now that we've transitioned inside, may not be appropriate. And so that ability to shift those gears on different levels is a piece of self-regulation. So it's not always just one area. So I just wanted to point that out. And so for many kids, and even some of us adults, screen time can be a way to self-regulate. It's a way to provide the type of sensory input that we're comfortable with. Again, it allows us to control many aspects of that. And so those regulation pieces can be a really powerful, screen time can be a very powerful tool to help us self-regulate. Again, the education piece and seeking out that can be a wonderful opportunity, communication, and many children are highly, highly motivated by the use of screen time. But unfortunately, there are some things that we sometimes see that can also impact the challenges of screen time, which is that because of the intensity of the sensory input can have some what I would call kind of addictive components. And so there are kids that have a very difficult time transitioning away from that screen time. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that, again, oftentimes screen time and the types of sensory input give us a large amount of dopamine release. And so when all of a sudden we take that away, our body can kind of almost go through a withdrawal symptom of, nope, I need that back. I need that dopamine release to keep moving. I need it. And so it can be really challenging for many people to transition away from technology. So it can make it, even for our kiddos that aren't having as many difficulties or aren't necessarily neurodivergent, although I think most of us are, I like to look at it that way. But those transitions can be really challenging. And so we're going to talk about how to manage some of those transitions. And for many of us, screen time, especially in the evening and before bed, can cause significant sleep disturbances. Again, it can wake the brain up and kind of get us thinking about other things and give us that high intensity sensory input when our system needs to be regulating down for sleep. So it's important to think about some of those aspects of that. So our body is designed from a self-regulation standpoint to try to get the input that we need, and we need to feel safe in our environment and feel organized in our environment. So when we feel safe is when we're able to engage and learn. And so when we have that self-regulation and we have the sensory input that we need, our body is able to be open to other activities, including, whether it's school or doing something else at home. But we have to have that sense of felt safety first. And so we're going to talk in a second here about some strategies to help kids get that throughout the day, to make sure that their nervous system doesn't kind of get too overwhelmed with that input. And so when we take that technology or screen time away, it can often cause a child to kind of go into what we call a fight, flight, or freeze response in terms of not being able to transition, and then their system kind of gets a little overloaded. And so we want to make sure that we're offering sensory input throughout the day that is giving kids the sensory inputs that we need, that their body needs to stay regulated. And that's true for the adults as well. Many adults seek out the opportunities throughout the day to get the sensory input that they might need. And that might be something as simple as, listening to music that helps kind of pep you up when you're in the car, or drinking coffee throughout the day, or chewing on a piece of gum throughout the day. Many adults like to work out because it gives them that sensory input that they need to help their bodies stay regulated. And so we really want to think about making sure that we would provide that input throughout the day for that child. If you're unsure of what types of sensory input your child responds best to, that's where occupational therapists are often the best person to ask or go to. So if your child isn't currently in occupational therapy, they're a great resource in terms of finding out what types of sensory input, how to provide your child that input throughout the day. And one of the biggest things with sensory input is that it has to be strong enough and long enough for that child. So the same activity might work for one child and it might not work for another child. And so we really want to learn about all of the systems that your child has and what types of input they gravitate to. So again, we get that dopamine release that helps us feel safe and want us to keep doing things. And so all of a sudden, when that's abruptly removed without proper warning, it can make it really challenging for kids to make that transition. Also, something I want you to just kind of keep in the back of your head as we go through these next suggestions is that we all have a certain amount of bandwidth in a given day. And so our bandwidth, or kind of a window of optimal function, if you want to look at it that way, is kind of a window or a band that allows us to kind of function at our best ability. So we're regulated, we're able to engage in activities. I'm able to, work and do a presentation if I need to, or I need to, go home and clean the kitchen, whatever it might be. I'm able to do that if I'm within that window. The tricky thing is that window changes, and that kind of bandwidth is going to be more narrow when other things are influencing that. So things like sleep deprivation, or being stressed out. There might be, I'm not feeling well. Maybe it's the tag on my shirt's driving me crazy today, and that's taking things out of that bandwidth. And so we just kind of want to be aware of, some days kids are going to have a wider bandwidth to make that transition out of or away from technology. And some days it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And so the days that that's more challenging, because there might be other things happening, or there may be sleep issues or whatever else might be going on, we want to really look at making sure that we are providing enough awareness and warning for that child in a way that doesn't kind of set that nervous system up on fire again. So let me give you an example. If I am setting a time limit for a child on technology, and I'm telling them, all right, in 10 minutes, we're going to be done, and you set an alarm on your phone, if that child has difficulty with loud, unexpected auditory input, that might startle them. And then that's going to cause their system to kind of go up on high alert again. And so it's going to make that transition more difficult. And so knowing where your child's strengths lie for sensory processing can be really helpful. Perhaps we need a 5-minute warning, and it's more, I'm going to come up behind the kiddo and give them some deep pressure and let them know that we're going to transition away from it in a few minutes. And so making sure that we're looking at what the best way to notify that child is going to be for that particular kiddo. And again, it may change based on the day too. But some transition things to think about when it comes to transitioning away from technology can be to create predictable routines with technology. So throughout the time of day, there's certain windows that they are allowed to be on technology, so that they know when it's coming and they know when it's going to end. One thing that's often helpful for most of us is when we know, trying to give that time limit and letting them know how much time they have when they get on technology. So giving them the expectation before they even start. So for most of us, we wake up, we go to work, and we know what the expectation is. We know what time we're done. We have a start and an end. So if a child is getting on technology, and we know in our head, we're thinking, okay, I'm going to let them do this for 10, 15 minutes, but maybe that child in their head was thinking, oh, I'm going to be on here for half an hour or more. And so maybe they start on something that might take a little bit longer, which means when you disrupt them, that transition is going to be more difficult. So letting them know, maybe you have 10 minutes, or maybe we set a visual timer ahead of time so that they know how much time that they have from the very beginning. It helps to take that starkness out of that end transition. Setting up, again, those extras, that structure ahead of time can be helpful. Providing support and engaging in the kids with them with their technology from someone that's trusted, from a trusted adult, and allowing that adult to make sure that we're from a safety standpoint, monitoring what they're doing, and making sure or engaging in that activity with them. There are a lot of apps and wonderful games and other things that families and parents can do with their child with technology. And the more that parents are aware of what their child is doing and what they're engaging in, it also helps to keep that child safe. So if your child, for example, has a special interest and they're watching a YouTube video, can you watch one with them? Learn about that, whatever that special interest might be. If there's a game that they really like, see if you have the ability to play that game with your child, even if it's for short periods of time. It helps to create less of that I'm removed from that technology, and allowing that kind of parent in that space as well. Again, use sensory specific, child specific strategies for how you're going to tell your child that screen time is over. Again, some kids might need reminders throughout. Some kids are like, nope, I'm in my zone. If you talk to me right now, I'm not having it. And so again, if a child has auditory defensiveness, maybe using a loud timer may not be the best way to support that child in transitioning away. Again, allowing consistent and predictable access to other sensory activities that give a child that strong dopamine release is also going to be helpful. So if the screen time is the only thing that they have access to at certain times of the day that gives them that release, that makes their body feel comfortable and helps them to feel good, they're always going to want to go for that one thing. And so if we have other things in the environment and other sensory activities that allow that child to have that same type of input, it's going to make it much easier for them to transition away from that. And talk to the child about what they would prefer when you're giving them that warning, if they have the cognitive ability to tell you that, and when that will happen. And so maybe maybe if you're thinking 30 minutes and the child was thinking, the child was thinking 30 minutes and you were going to say 10, maybe find somewhere in the middle and come to an agreement of how much time is going to be spent on that technology. Sometimes though, that's why having some of those predictable routines of the amount of time spent on it can be very helpful. But again, those are things we want to do prior to getting onto technology so that it's not as stark of a contrast when you're stopping it. So again, I like to really think for our kids that are tending to get that kind of hyper focus on some of the things within that technology, whether again, it's a game, video, whatever it might be, when that hyper focus is kicking in. I really encourage you to really think about shifting more of a state of regulation because they're regulated and hyper focused. I don't know if you guys have ever had that happen where you get into something and you're really focused on it. You're working on, for me, when it was happening, I was working on this presentation. I get hyper focused and then someone calls your phone and you kind of get yanked out of that. Or all of a sudden you're realizing, oh, I need to get to the bathroom and I need to get up and go move. And so that disruption to that hyper focus can be very jarring. And so again, making sure that we are providing sensory regulation to slowly pull them out of that. And again, maybe it's making sure that we are doing something else to really make sure that we're providing those highly motivating special interests to transition away from that technology. Novelty and brand new things are another way to do that. Novelty, often, again, we get that big dopamine release with that. Again, using high intensity sensory supports throughout the day will help to provide that regulation, but also can really help to transition away if we're going to, let's say, something else that they know is going to help their body to feel comfortable as well. And again, working with a parent to, or a sibling who might have a little bit more regulation to work on that co-regulation, or coming and engaging with that child for maybe the last few minutes so that we can make that transition together, and continuing to provide that source of co-regulation as well. So again, some tips with just general parenting and parenting and technology. is all about finding balance and finding what specific needs your child and family has. We'll give you some general guidelines for amount of screen time per year of age. Again, those are guidelines. And keep in mind that many children are doing technology at school now as well, and that's been part of their day as well. So we want to make sure that we're being cognizant of how much of that time is spent. But again, some kids do need it, and we want to find a balance. Again, never underestimate the power of engaging in all of those senses and or engaging in that technology with your child. Again, there's wonderful ways for parents to be engaged with that technology with their child. And again, setting those planned information or kind of structure around screen time ahead of time can also be really helpful, and focusing on that connection and joy and that shared experience. Again, I know for some parents, it's hard to think about some of the things that they're looking at, and you might not be as interested in some of the things, but taking time for that child to really understand what they're doing on technology and what it is they love about it, and take that opportunity to find that connection and joy in that experience, which is again why we encourage families to get engaged with the technology at the same time as their child. So setting clear limits, be consistent with it, making sure that you're using parental controls, and encouraging, again, other offline activities that you as a family and or that child might be able to engage in, that's going to give them some different types of input that will help that transition away. Creating opportunities for tech-free times in the home when you guys are maybe engaged in other activities as a family. And again, some kids may enjoy earning screen time as a reward, but again, for some of our kids that use technology and augmentative communication, I would be cautious about how you use that. Many children need that for regulation, and so we don't want to use that as a reward. But if a child is enjoying that and they can transition away from it, and we've done the other things that we need to do, it's certainly a wonderful way to do that. And then just to finish up here, here are some general, again, these are general guidelines about the recommendations of screen time per year of age and how many hours, which again, I think most of us as adults probably spend more than 2 hours on a screen in a day. So it is challenging finding that balance of screen time versus the non-screen time activities. So here's some examples of some wonderful apps that are available both for Android devices and Apple devices. These are some for kind of that 2-year plus age group. Here's some for 3, and then on the next page we have for some older kids, but these are just fun, interactive, creative play types of activities. And again, technology in itself offers us a wonderful opportunity for education, and there are some great fine motor apps out there that work on things like pointing and tracing and pincer grasps, and even working on letter formation. So they are a wonderful tool, but again, we want to encourage the combination of doing it with your child and making sure that we are allowing it to be as interactive and kind of working on that relationship all at the same time. Here's some resources for 5 and older that work a little bit more on attention, memory, and organization. So again, if you have any other questions, we'll open it up for a minute here and see if anyone has any thoughts.
Thank you so much, Jess. You guys can put a question in the chat if you'd like, or hop on video, that's fine too. My kids grew up on Baby Mozart. Do you remember those? I mean, that's dating me a little bit, but yeah. They loved Baby Mozart, and it was so intriguing for their little brain. But things changed so much from Baby Mozart to now we've got a handheld device, you know, where they can access just anything and everything. So I appreciate this conversation so much. What are your suggestions as far as setting that routine. If you haven't had the routine in place, we talk a lot about how the importance of those routines, and all of a sudden as a parent, you're like, oh my gosh, we should have put limits on this a long time ago. What are some of your suggestions for how to start that routine with your kiddos?
Yeah.
Thank you,
Routines are really,
because I am there. Thanks for
yes.
asking.
It's, I think for any of us, changing our routine is the hardest thing. And so the general recommendation, anytime we start trying to make a transition to a new routine, is pick one time of day. So don't try to like change it all at once. So I would pick one aspect of screen time that you would want to start with. So if it's setting a consistent time of day that you would like your child to have access to screen time, I would start with just working on, we're going to have access at this time of day, and start with that. If you're worried about you want to start with the consistency of the length of time, again, I would pick one time of day to start with, when you're going to set that clear expectation of, this is how long we're going to do it, and this is how we're, when we're going to end. And I recommend that time of day being when everyone's going to have the most bandwidth. So that might not be the best time to try to make that transition, when it's 7 o'clock at night and everybody's tired and cranky, or you're trying to get dinner on the table at the same time, because even us as adults, in order to provide that regulation model, we're often not going to be in the best place to be able to do that. So maybe there's a 15-minute window right when everybody gets home before the chaos of that starts. Or maybe, depending on your family, you have a really good bedtime routine, and that's when everyone starts winding down, and that might be the best time, when everyone's kind of gotten through dinner and we have that moment. And so pick one aspect of it and kind of start there. Maybe for some parents, it might be, I want to be more involved. And so maybe picking a time when you can do an activity together, and then maybe kind of transition into the time limit piece of that. Once you've, maybe mom's going to come and sit with you and do this for 5 minutes, and then we get, 10, 15 minutes by ourselves, to be able to make that transition. But I caution you on trying to all of a sudden make giant changes, because that's going to be very abrupt for most kids. And so if they're used to having a lot of access to technology, and all of a sudden we go, hey, no, we're going to only let you do it for this amount of time, they're going to get really, really upset. And so trying to pick out the most important piece for you and your family is often where I would recommend you start, kind of get that routine in for a few weeks, and then maybe add another piece of the puzzle in. And really, I would look at that in terms of when the child's being offered it, consistency of time limits, and then offering opportunities for other types of sensory input, that at another time that might help to, again, give that dopamine release similarly to the way the screen time does. But I don't recommend trying to do it all at once, and just kind of piece the puzzles out little by little.
Well, that's great. Do we have any other questions out there before we say goodbye today on this nice long weekend? Hopefully everybody gets to have a long weekend.
Yes, no, this was great and very helpful. I was glad to see one of the main apps on the recommendations was Toca Boca, because my 4-year-old loves that one. And it kind of shows you what they're interested in, like what they gravitate towards. And I do try to like look and see, well, she comes to show me, and I have to try to,
it's hard, because you're like, I don't know if I'm interested in this. It's
but you
some of the kids that want to come and talk about
cool.
things like roadblocks and things, and it's like, I don't know, but I think it's also important to model that, like you're paying attention and you're interested in it, and depending on which, because there's lots of different little ones, but hey, I've noticed you really liked doing this creative activity here. Maybe we could try doing that, and with our paper, or we could try it doing it a different way, kind of in real life, and showing that many of those opportunities are there too.
It definitely shows what their interest. So she took an interest in like the pregnant ladies, and going to the hospital and having the babies and the families. And I'm like, oh my God. So now everyone she creates has like this pregnant and I'm like, I hope I don't have a bunch of grandkids.
Well, maybe that's going to encourage her to be a doctor or an obstetrician.
Or a doctor or something.
Right,
She is obsessed with the little pregnant
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. Well, and it opens up a great time to talk about
Yes,
those
to
things.
talk about things. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for attending today. Thank you, Jessica, for this wonderful information. You put together so many great things for us today. So I really want to thank you for your time. Stay tuned on our social media platforms at Metro EHS for next month's webinar. We're not quite sure what that one will be yet, but it's in the works. So we want to see you there. If you have any questions or any needs at all, please give us a call or head over to one of our clinics and we will do our best to help you. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.